What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Hope you're all doing well. Thanks so much for taking the time out of your day to click here on another video. And we are continuing on my journey of diving into some Brazilian films. It's been a few weeks since I covered A Dog's Will, which was my last Brazilian film here on the channel. And I planned on getting another Brazilian review out very shortly after, but I completely lost track of time. I started covering a bunch of other things, but it's time to dive into some new Brazilian films with one that a lot of people requested in my comments to check out. So let's start with the first one in this franchise, and that film is called Elite Squad. Let's take a trip back to 2007 for a film written and directed by José Padilha, who wrote this film alongside several others that stars people like Wagner, Moura, André, Ramiro, Ciao, Junqueira, Fernanda Machado, and many more. And if I butchered any of those names, I'm so sorry. I'm trying here. But before we get too far into this, if you guys are a fan of retrospective reviews like this, up-to-date and early reviews, live streams, and the occasional vlog, then you guys are in the right place. And I'd like to ask you to consider subscribing. But if you're a returning viewer, thanks so much for coming back. And as I've said at the start of all of these Brazilian reviews that I've been doing recently, if there's some more movies you want to see me cover that are from Brazil, let me know in the comments down below. Throw down some suggestions, because I definitely have been building a list, and there's going to be a bunch I'm going to slowly be getting to very soon. And I'll tell you right now that the next one I plan on doing is the sequel to this film, Elite Squad 2. So we will be talking about that here on the channel at some point in the near future. But yeah, going into this film, I knew nothing about it other than the fact that it had to do with police, specifically about police brutality and different things like that, and corruption within the police force. And this was one of the most highly requested films in my comment sections in every single Brazilian video that I have done so far. So a big thanks to anybody who stopped by. Let's get into what this film is all about, and then we'll get into my thoughts on the film. Elite Squad takes us into the 90s, and there's a lot going on in this film. It's hard to fully break it all down in one fell swoop with one sentence or one straightforward summary, because this is a film that is touching on a bunch of things. The basic gist is that the Pope is going to be coming into the area in Rio de Janeiro, in a pretty sketchy part of town. Before he gets there, though, the police chief pretty much tells his elite squad, hey, listen, we need to go into the slums every night and do what we can to snuff out all of the criminals, all of the drug dealers, anybody who's doing crime in the area, so that that area is as safe as possible once the Pope comes into town. Amidst all this, we're focusing on several different characters, most notably Wagner Moura's character of Captain Nascimento, who is finding himself in a bit of a tough space. He's the leader of this group called BOPE, and here in the States we probably would call them BOPE, but they are the elite squad, and he is part of a top tier group of police who go out there and are willing to do everything and anything to get to the end of the rainbow, if you will. Whatever they need to do, they're gonna do it. Whatever kind of violence they need to do, whatever kind of pressure, whatever kind of torture they have to do, they're gonna do it. They're gonna do it to get to their end goal, which is getting to some of these criminals. And so we find him as the leader of this group, and he's struggling. He's struggling mentally. We see over the course of the film that he's got a lot of stress issues because of the pressure of this role, and you kind of just start to find him losing his humanity as time goes on. And as this is going on, he's also expecting his firstborn child from his wife. She doesn't want him to do this anymore. He's struggling with the entire notion of continuing to go out there. There's the conversation of getting his replacement as the baby is coming into the fold, but he still has to do this job, and he takes it very seriously. He goes out there, he knows what he has to do, he has gun in hand. But this film very much touches on corruption. It touches on the fact that there's a lot of people in the police force that are corrupt, that have the cartel in their pocket. There's a lot of individuals who are part of the police force who are lazy and don't really want the trouble. We see throughout the course of the film that there are times where there are dead bodies found in one person's area, only for them to move the body to a different area so another group of police officers would have to deal with it. And sometimes those police officers would just end up taking that body and moving it to another location so another group of police officers would have to deal with it, which just creates this environment of lies, mischief, and all kinds of, shady doings amidst the people that are supposed to protect and serve the community of Brazil that they are in. And so, yeah, over the course of the film, we see how this really affects the certain individuals. I already mentioned Wagner Moura's character. I think the character I found myself the most connected to in the film was the character of André Mateus, who's played by André Ramiro. And he's a character who's going to law school. He's just coming into the police force. He's a rookie, and he wants to do good. He's got a good head on his shoulders. He wants to do law school and go into criminal law. He wants to do what he can to, beat what people would hope a cop is. But in his journeys through law school, he learns that people don't really have a good outlook of the cops in a lot of ways for good reason. And he himself starts to find the corruption and the darkness of being on this police force with all these other corrupt individuals, slowly starting to kind of eat away at his humanity. By the time you get to the end of the film, he's a completely different character. He's lost his best friend, he's going through a hard time, and he's kind of pushed away everything that he believed in around him. And he found that, trying to be a cop and trying to be a law school student on the side while hiding that he's a cop ultimately just ended up making his world more dangerous, not only for himself but also for the people around him, as we get to see him building relationships with other students in his law school. He was the character I found myself the most connected to, and I think he was a really great way to kind of look into the souls of the individuals who come into the police force. And it's something that you see everywhere, right? There's a lot of police corruption across the entire world, in every country, in every state. It just happens everywhere. It's a damn shame. And when you look at a lot of stuff that happens in places like Brazil, you definitely hear about some really dark stuff that happens. And here in the States, we're no different. I think a lot of times things are sugar coated, and I'm sure there's a little bit of that in the Brazil as well. I'm sure there's definitely a different outlook from certain individuals depending on the different places that you live in. And so I'd like to open up the floor here as well in this moment to ask you guys to comment down below, how realistic is this for you if you live in Brazil? Did this really kind of showcase in a lot of ways what it's like for a lot of police and a lot of police brutality and corruption in Brazil? Is that only kind of in certain areas? Is it everywhere? I definitely want to hear some comments down below as to what the personal experience is like for a lot of people. But yeah, I think this film does a really good job, specifically through the character of Mateus, of showing us how you can have a really good person with a good head on their shoulders who's slowly corrupted by the darkness, the violence, and the flat out just greed and selfishness amidst the world of, again, people who are meant to protect and serve. Another character we focus on here is the character of Neto, played by Caio Junqueira, and I enjoyed him as well. I thought he was an enjoyable character throughout the course of the mix. Again, another rookie who's coming in who wants to do good, that ends up finding himself as a victim amidst all of this that's going on. And what's interesting about this film as well is that while there are criminals in the film, while there are drug dealers and there's violence and there's the individuals who you would look at as the criminals in this situation, this film does such a good job of really painting everybody in a layer of corruption. This isn't a film that's saying these are the good cops and those are the bad criminals and these are the good regular criminals, but these are the really bad cops, or these are the good cops. Like, it just goes to show that there's corruption in everybody, and that if you allow yourself to remain in an area and work alongside people who are already corrupt and only are doing things for themselves, you ultimately find yourselves be corrupted over time. It's that classic thing that if there is a spoiled fruit amidst a bunch of other fruit, of course eventually the other fruit are going to be spoiled as well. And so I think this film did a good job of not really having a good or a bad guy. You kind of just feel like a fly on the wall who's seeing all of these events unfold and just seeing just flat out corruption, selfishness, greed, violence, and how ultimately it hurts the police force and it hurts the people that they try to protect, and of course the criminals as well, which just ends up creating a cycle of just more violence and more corruption. And I thought that was a really interesting takeaway I had from the film. Now, when it comes down to some things I didn't love about this film, I wasn't super crazy about the storytelling here. A lot of the film is Wagner Moura's character doing a narration of different things that are going on throughout the course of the film, which is okay. I don't mind narration in films. I think it can be done very well. But I think because of the way that the film was told, and because we're jumping around to these different characters in the way that we are, there was a part of this film that oftentimes made me feel like I wish we were kind of a little bit more in depth with who these characters are. I wanted to get to know them. I wanted to get to know Wagner Moura's family a little bit more, his wife. I wanted to get a little bit more in touch with those elements so that I felt a little bit of a deeper connection to the characters on an emotional level. And that's not to say that I didn't feel connected to them at all, but it felt like I was just seeing a really solid painting of the overall picture and being told things more so than really going through the story and feeling things for these characters in general. That's not a huge negative at the end of the day. I think that this still is a really solid movie that definitely depicts what it needs to depict in a really effective manner, and it's really compelling in a lot of areas. It's also very well made when it comes comes down to the overall cinematography. There's some great blood and guts in the film, some great practical effects that are really effective and creepy and definitely add to a scary feel for the reality of the things that you're seeing here. The film is also utilizing tons of real locations. You can tell that there's not really a utilization of, practical sets that they built. They're using real locations, real slums that allow this film to feel really tangible and dirty and grimy in a lot of ways, and definitely make you feel like you're in these tense situations with the characters. On top of that, you have some great gunplay in the film when there is some of that isn't ever used for an action sense, but instead is kind of used to really elevate these tense moments that make these guns feel scary, and I think that that's where the film really worked. Now, I did praise the cinematography of this film in terms of how the camera moves, and I like the way that these characters are staged in these individual sequences, but one thing I didn't love about the film was its contrast and oversaturation. It was something you saw a lot in the 2000s. One of my favorite franchises, the Ciao franchise, is famous for having overly saturated shots in the film that oftentimes really heightened up like blues and teals and greens in those movies. And a lot of times we saw that in the 2000s with a lot of films, and this film is no different, where you have a lot of high saturation in certain sequences that really bring out yellows and oranges and reds and whites in a lot of areas. And at times it's okay, but at times it made things look a little bit muddy and dark. So just on a visual level, I don't think this is the most visually enticing film, but on one hand, I also really appreciate that the film has this kind of darker, muddier look because it's dealing with darker subject matter, and I think for the most part, the aesthetic of the film definitely matches up to the tone of the film. So while that is a negative, I do understand maybe why that was the way that they went with it. Outside of that though, my biggest gripe really is that I just wish the story had been a little bit stronger and a little bit more streamlined in a couple of areas. I appreciated the narration, but at times it feels like I was being told things more than I was really being shown things or feeling things. But ultimately, with all of that said, I think that Elite Squad is a really solid film that again showcases some really dark things in a very realistic manner. One thing I've praised a lot of Brazilian films for that I've covered so far is the fact that these films are so realistic when it comes down to their performances, and this film is no different. Again, I'm just absolutely impressed by the performances. There's a sense of everything feeling real. These characters feel real. One thing you see in a lot of Hollywood films these days is that thing of like a characters saying lines and they don't really talk over one another too often anymore. And I remember as a kid growing up watching a lot of films from the 70s and the 80s and the early 90s where there was a lot of that. Characters would talk over one another. It felt like there was real human interaction that was going on. And this film definitely takes us back to that, where it feels like you have all of these different characters who have things to say in certain moments, and it doesn't feel like it's like, hey, I'm going to say my line and then it's your turn to say your line. Instead, it felt like real people talking and kind of having discourse and cutting each other off, and the conversations just felt real. And especially in these really heightened moments where you do have high stakes and you do have these characters who are in danger of their lives, the performances made everything feel all that more tense, all that more scary, all that more realistic. And again, I want to end this off by saying that I definitely want to hear from you guys. If you live in Brazil, how realistic is this to the real kind of experience that you might have when it comes down to the police and to what they call BOPE, the Elite Squad? I definitely want to hear what you guys have to say down below. Where does this film kind of take creative liberties? How different is it from reality? Whatever the case may be, I look forward to any and all comments down below. But honestly, that's going to be my thoughts on Elite Squad. A very solid film, highly recommended if you're looking into diving into more realistic, dark, foreign film. If you're like me, you're diving into some films from outside of your country, I highly recommend Elite Squad. I think there's something here. I think Wagner Moura is great. I think the rest of the cast is really solid, and I think this film again touches on some pretty real and unfortunately just very honest realities that we have going on in this world. So a big thanks to you guys for watching. Hit that like button, comment your thoughts, subscribe for more videos, and leave some comments down below as for what other Brazilian films I should check out. So a big thanks to you guys for watching. I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye bye.